the Middle-aged Bodcast. Getting older, but having some laughs.
Hi podcasters, TA here. Before Season 4 launches, we're alternating some reposts with new bonus episodes. And this one's a look back at where it all started. We're revisiting the episode where Rich interviewed me about The Doctor's Hidden Patients, my debut novel, which was released in October 2024. This chat originally aired in August 2024, just before the book came out, so it's a great way to hear the story behind the story. And next week, on May the 6th, we've got something brand new for you. I'll be reading the first chapter in a special audiobook style preview. Don't miss it.
Welcome back to the Middle-aged Bodcast. This is episode 2, and coming up this week, I'm going to be interviewing T.A. Shelano, my co-host on the podcast, about his debut novel, The Doctor's Hidden Patients.
But first, Rich, we did promise listeners that we would be doing our weekly challenge weigh-in, and I can confirm that we have, for this episode, conducted our initial weigh-ins, and notwithstanding the fact between the two of us we weigh a small baby elephant, and I rather had a much better calorific holiday than I had hoped, having stepped back on the scales for the first time. We are now ready to go with our challenge. We will not release our actual weights until the final episode, when we will give a start and end weight. And you can sort of follow us in the next few weeks as we hopefully lose, but possibly gain weight with our weekly weigh-ins. So looking forward to trying to get some weight back off.
Me too. That's going to be a really interesting challenge to go through, especially when one of our friends has decided he wants to invite us for a curry on Saturday. So certainly going to have to watch what we're eating this weekend, and certainly be looking at maybe just not having so many side orders.
As most people say, diet starts Monday.
Well, we shall see. But however, folks, it's time for episode 2, and we're talking The Doctor's Hidden Patients. So I think we should start this off, TA. Obviously, we're talking about your debut novel, The Doctor's Hidden Patients. The first time I heard about it was a couple of years ago. I think you'd mentioned that you were starting to write your debut book, and you'd been to a writer's retreat sort of thing, and kind of it had inspired you to continue with your idea and writing your novel. So can you just take us through sort of that initial process? What made you want to write a book, and then the support you received in those initial early days?
Thanks, Rich. I'd thought about writing a book for quite a while, and I think it was really around coming up with an initial concept, which I did for a sort of a thriller novel. I wanted to do something that was fast-paced and a bit of a page-turner was my ambition. And you're right, I did go to a writer's retreat, which was now just before the first lockdown, so quite some time ago now. And at that point, I hadn't got much material together, just a few small thousand words, really. And it was just useful to go to that and listen to other people writing their own novels, and actually spend a dedicated plot of time there, surrounded with other people, where you then work on your project, come back, talk about what you've been doing in sort of intervals and gaps. And then, of course, we had the lockdown that sort of shortly followed afterwards, and is where I really did the majority of the book, and just kept working away at that until eventually I got a final sort of draft, or first draft, should I say, in the can, and really that's where, frankly, the hard work starts all over again.
So going back to the writer's retreat, was that something that was lots of debut writers making their first book, or were some of them more experienced? How did that kind of work?
So it's open to anybody through a sort of the specific company that runs them. There are people there who they might be working on their first novel, could have been working on one for a while. Could be other people there who've wrote previously, Though I remember at the time there was a lady she'd been a self-published author of a novel and was writing another one. So it's very much depends upon the event that you go to as to who is there. But it's generally everybody united really around supporting each other in what they're doing. So it's not a competitive environment. It's very much around listening to what other people have got to say. I went to one again very recently. Now I'm at the start of my second novel, and just speaking to somebody there came up with a really good idea about linking the second novel I'm working on back to the Doctor's Hidden Patients, which again was a really useful thing that I hadn't thought about. So it's just sharing knowledge, being supportive of what people are doing, and really it's dedicating that time. So taking that few hours out where you are just sat there in a quiet sort of environment, working through, having the breaks. You sort of have some sort of lunch and coffee as well. So really, really supportive and helpful environment for people of all levels of their writing.
Sounds like a really good experience. And you mentioned that you'd done this obviously before the lockdowns with the pandemic. So how did you approach, once we got into the pandemic, sort of the writing process then? You'd obviously been to this retreat and had some support on sort of getting started and working upon the initial thought process of the novel. And obviously I think you'd said to me a while back, correct me if I'm wrong, that you had actually started writing a bit before you went to this retreat.
Yeah, so before I went to the retreat, I'd done a bit, but it was like a very small number of thousands of words. Probably a similar stage to where I've just been again recently with the second one, actually. And just kind of helping to get that momentum moving where, you might write a couple of thousand words in that session on that day. You move that progress along and try and help that propel you. So then when we got into the kind of the lockdown period, I think, everyone had their own experiences of that, but certainly where there were the restrictions on things that you obviously couldn't do, it gave me more time. And I'm sure that my wife would have preferred me to be doing something completely much more constructive on the house. And I'm sure there was more than a few days where she thought I was sort of making it up, that I was actually sitting there at the laptop, genuinely trying to sort of plot out and write what ended up becoming an 84,000 word novel. But that was what it became, really. It was using that time when you hadn't got anything else going on to be constructive around building and moving that forward. And I think I got to a point where I was probably halfway through and I was like, I'm going to finish this. It became almost a massive challenge. So I hear so many people say that they, started writing a novel, gave up, or even when I've been to the conventions, people who are still working on the first one have been working on them for a long time, and certainly mine took a long time to do. But that lockdown period did help me to dedicate time that would have been harder under ordinary circumstances, where I would have needed to be a lot more disciplined. And it's probably the challenge I've now got with the second one.
It certainly sounds like you've learned a lot from going to these sessions like you have, and also from completing the first novel now. And just going back to that first novel, obviously you mentioned completing a first draft and then having to go through all the processes after that. So what kind of happens? You write the novel as a sort of draft, your first initial version of it. How do you then go about finding what needs to change, what people like about it? How do you kind of get that feedback?
I think different people take different approaches to that. I took the approach of sort of speaking to somebody that I know who'd done sort of editing, copywriting type stuff, and was quite a big reader of that sort of genre of books, just to get that initial feedback, pick up some initial thoughts and ideas, and then sort of work through tweaking it, go through your draft, work through what you like, what you don't like, until you get something that you're happy with. I mean, of course, the thing with the industry is, which I came to as completely not somebody from the industry or that background at all. So it has been a massive learning experience in that sense. So I did try out for the traditional publishing route first in terms of approaching agents, and that has been certainly an interesting, if not difficult, experience around people who don't reply, the people that do reply, but you don't necessarily get much feedback. I was particularly fortunate that one of the agents who I approached liked it and actually gave me some really good feedback on how I could improve it. They ultimately didn't take me on as a client as such, which was, hugely disappointing experience. But the benefit of having that feedback took it from, it was actually my first sort of finalised draft was around 77,000 words. From the feedback from the agent has now taken it forward to a completed version at 84,000 words. And having the book professionally edited, which was one of the advice I was given. And so I feel that now it's that learning journey as you go. Okay, we've got this. This is what would improve it. And that feedback was so helpful when it was given to me. I then went away and reworked the chapters, beginning of chapters predominantly. They liked how I was ending chapters, but felt there needed to be some more of the introduction into the beginnings. So I went away and did that. Been through the sort of editorial process, checking the factual accuracy, sort of spelling, grammar, all those things that you want it to be like a professional product, even if you haven't been able to get taken on, as a formal client with an agent and then through the publishing route. If you're going to self-publish a book, which is, where we're at now, that I'm planning to release The Doctor's Hidden Patients at shelanobooks.co.uk on the 12th of October 2024. You have to go through that because you want to put something out to the world that you're proud of, and with the best will in the world, without going through some of that professionalization, especially editing, proofreading, trying to take on board some feedback, it would never be as good as it could be. So I am now really pleased with the end product, and I can see the difference that it has made by having two professionals in the industry who've been involved in helping with that.
So you've given me a bit of an insight over the last few months, a bit of an insight into the processes that you've gone through with how to sort of market the book a little bit, and some of the tools that are available to help you with the writing process. You've sort of touched a little bit upon having the professional editor as well to go through and proofread and check that text and copyright for the book and make sure everything's historically accurate, as you said. And they actually gave you a little bit of a tip. I seem to recall you saying where there was something where you'd referenced something from pop culture and it was just slightly out.
Yeah, so my book is set in 1999, and the editor realised one of the sort of cultural references that I've made from that time, where I was sort of set in the summer of that year. That particular reference wasn't until later in 1999. So it's really good to get that point where if there are issues with your story, the continuity thing was always an important thing to me. And when I was going along through the writing process, I had a separate document where I was documenting what I was doing with each chapter and characters to try and avoid those issues where suddenly you do something that contradicts something far earlier on, and to have that good continuity. And for the most part, the editorial feedback on the continuity was good, but even the value of that, of picking up those odd little things and things where, well, what happened there, that sort of stops, do something with that, revisit that, some of those sort of ideas, that just getting that benefit of somebody else's experience was really useful. I mean, you obviously, Rich, are in the position of being one of handful of people who has had an opportunity to read the novel. So yeah, I mean, obviously it's really interesting to get feedback from readers as well, and your thoughts.
Well, yeah, I read the novel Doctor's Hidden Patients. We should get the title in there, really, shouldn't we, a bit more? So yeah, I read the Doctor's Hidden Patients a couple of months ago. It was really interesting, actually, because I think from my point of view, having known you for so long, and also from sort of expectation of things, especially with a title like The Doctor's Hidden Patients, to then read what the story is about. And it's not what you expect it to be at all. It is very much a page turner, and it is something that I read very quickly. I think it took me about 2 days to read on the journey to work and home from work on the bus. So yeah, it's been a really interesting read for me, and certainly I think just seeing there are parts of it that are very much you, and there's certain parts of your humor in it, and then there are other parts of it where I can't believe that you've written that. It's more of a, oh, that's really good sort of storytelling and writing, and I don't mean that as a sort of dig. I mean that very much in the way of it was just unexpected how it came across in a really good way. Some really good twists, really good plot points, and some really interesting characters in there. Obviously, there are a couple of characters that I've become very attached to and find quite humorous and would love to see more of. But then there are other people that have read it that have said they don't get that, and there are other characters they really like. So it's really good in that point of view. And I think for a first novel as well, just to have that out there as a, just where you've gotten it to so far pre-release is absolutely incredible, really. Just to sort of think that if we go back even probably 6 months from here, there wasn't, the steps that we've gone through to try and get the website launched and some of the social media and things like that, and the things we've learned from looking at other authors and other sort of influencers and things like that. It has been a really good learning curve for me as well, actually, from reading, and it's inspired me to do a little bit more creative stuff as well. As we've sort of alluded to in our debut episode, there was a short film that we wrote many years ago, and we will be touching upon that in a future episode. And actually, there's a lot of things not so much related to sort of literature or film and TV, but there's a lot of things I do want to start looking at again with that creative process of things. So it has been really inspiring and a really strong story. There are characters in there that you just want to hear more from, and the fact that you said at the retreat that you went to, there was someone who kind of gave you that tip of going back and sort of referencing things from there. I think you mentioned it's not a direct sequel, but it's just sort of set kind of now with that little tie-in, probably in the same kind of universe.
Yeah, so the first one, as I say, was set in 1999, whereas the one I'm working on at the moment is not directly related, is more to the current time. But there is sort of a bit of an opportunity within that to kind of indirectly link back to the first one, which is what I'm going to do. So it won't be a direct sequel. I have thought about that in terms of yourself and the smaller number of other readers have talked about the opportunities for prequel, sequel, and spin-off opportunities from the Doctor's Hidden Patients, which certainly excites me in terms of the future if this was to become something I carry on continuing to do. Now I'm working on a second novel. Obviously, I will want to finish that. Where it will go after that, I don't know. But having those options to be able to look and say, there are people saying, well, I'd really like to see this. And that's like the before this era of the Doctor's Hidden Patients. I really like to see those characters and how they develop in a different way. That's great to have those opportunities. I kind of think a lot of people do specific, books in a series, and I wasn't really struck on necessarily doing that. And this probably would fit slightly out of that, where things would be offshooted together but could connect back. Does give me great opportunities, and yeah, I'm really pleased with it. I think the one thing that I would say, and I think that would unite from the most successful to the least successful, which is more the end most people unfortunately end up at, but with writing a book is such a hard process, and it's so much more difficult than I ever gave it credit for. I would definitely say that when people say, you hear interviews, celebrities, authors, things like that say, I've written this book. It sounds such a throwaway comment, but to actually sit down and do it, and get it to the end, and for it to make sense, and put it out there, and for people to enjoy it is fantastic. I think that is the one thing I'm taking away from this. Obviously, I'm not a full-time author. This is very much, a secondary interest thing, really. But it's been able to produce something that can be there as kind of like an artistic expression from me and from the small number of people who've kind of read the whole thing. It's been just great for people to say they enjoyed it. I think it makes all that effort worthwhile. If there may be people who would read it and won't like it, of course, but in terms of some of the people and what they've said, has been such a positive thing for me. If I wanted to carry on with the writing, if you feel like there's an audience and that people enjoy what you're doing, I think that's quite motivational as well.
Well, thank you, TA. I think this has been a really good conversation about the book, and certainly it's going to be interesting to see what happens with your second novel. For those who, missed it last time, if you just want to let us know when The Doctor's Hidden Patients, your first novel, will be getting released, please.
Yep, so we are working towards a release of the 12th of October 2024, exclusively at shelanobooks.co.uk. So please visit my site there and have a look. And also you can follow me on X, formerly known as Twitter, at ShelanoT. And I've got a Shelano Books page on Facebook as well. So yeah, please check it out. It's a crowded market, but hopefully we've done something that people will like.
You're right, it is a crowded market, and certainly I know you've spoken to a few other authors sort of local to us and gotten some really good advice from them, and maybe that's something we could speak about in a future edition, a little bit about kind of getting feedback from peers and things like that, and getting some advice on what to do with these kind of endeavors into doing something like writing a book, or as we said, the film that we written a little while back. But thank you very much, TA. It's been a really good chatting about the book, and I've said it to you obviously many a time, but here on the podcast I'll say best of luck with it. I hope it does well, and we are going to be back, of course, for our next episode. We are going to be having a chat in the next episode about the film that we wrote, which is a little short film called Bliss Revisited, which was the story of Britain's biggest girl band, who had a few big hits in their career, faded into obscurity, and then their manager decided to bring them back. And if that sounds a little bit like Girls 5 Ever, we wrote ours first, and we'll be telling you about it in the next episode. I just want to once again say thank you to TA. Thanks, Rich, and for including me on the Middle-aged Bodcast. So yeah, it's good. Follow us at Middle-aged Bodcast on X, formerly known as Twitter. Yes, and we will be trying to launch some more social media handles in the near future and getting some more content out there. So please do stay tuned for that. But yeah, another really good week. We are going to be back, as I said, next week with another episode, and we will also be giving you a few updates on the weekly weigh-in and some of our challenges, and maybe by then we will have decided on a forfeit for who loses the least amount of weight. We will almost certainly will have done that. I look forward to us being a slightly smaller baby elephant next time around. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody. Don't forget to subscribe to the Middle-aged Bodcast wherever you get your podcasts from. We'll see you next week.
Two best mates, yeah, they're taking a stand. Rachel, Rich, and TA got your health in the hands. Williams, laughs, and tales they tell. For beats and nights, the workouts, they're keeping it real.